discussing the Gemara had cited Rav Gidl Amarav that we were able to learn shlichus, the law of agency, from the Nesiim representing the members of their shvatim to divide the land. So the Gemara originally said, from here we were able to derive the concept, the principle of shlichus, of agency, that the Nasi represents each member of his tribe in terms of dividing the land. So the Gemara says it's not possible. Of course, there were a number of ketanim, there were minors, and a minor cannot make a shliach. So Gemara says it wasn't shlichus, it was chiyah. That the Nasi represented each person, because since it was beneficial to the person to receive his portion, so we say Zochnod Mishlo B'fanov. So what is the Gemara addressing at this moment? We're addressing ketanim. We're not able to say we're able to learn the laws of shlichus, because with shlichus, a cotton, a minor, cannot have a shliach. Because Rashi cites all the locations we find shlichus, the Torah says ish. The person has to be an adult. So how is it possible here that the minor appointed the Nasi to be a shliach, a minor cannot appoint a shliach? So Mar says it's not shlichus, it's a chiyah. Zochnod Mishlo B'fanov. Right? That if you, unbeknown to a third party, so the cotton not having halachic intelligence is the equivalent that he's not present. So the Nasi acting on his behalf, although it's beneficial to him, we have a principle from here that if you want to do an action on behalf of a third party where it's beneficial to that person, unbeknown to him, your action is attributed to him. But it's not, you're his agent. So therefore, the Koton, this is the way the Ramban learns the Gemara. I mentioned the Ramban. So the Ramban derives from this Gemara, we see clearly that the mechanics of Zchiyah is unrelated to Shlichus. It's not you're the agent of the person who you're acting on his behalf. But rather, it's another principle called Zchiyah.
This minor not to be present, there would be more land for everybody else.
But before we get there,
That's what we were talking
wait, before we get there, let's just establish. I mentioned, so what is the issue? That a minor cannot have a shliach. Why can he not have a shliach? Because we have a catch-22. Because how does one become a shliach? He has to be appointed. So to be appointed, the person who appoints the agent to represent him has to be a bardas, has to have a degree of intelligence. And since the intelligence of a child, of a minor, is not valued, so therefore his appointmentship has no value. But what about if we're able to say that there are situations where the minor does not have to appoint the agent to represent him? Because of the nature of the circumstance, the Torah appoints the individual to represent the minor. So if that's the case, we don't find anywhere all the sources that Rashi cites get kiddushin. There, it's the person bringing about the result. But you could have a situation where a third party wants to bring about something positive for another party. In that situation, there the Torah points to shliach. Because all the sources, we don't find anywhere that a minor cannot have a shliach. The only reason he's not able to have, it's a circumstantial issue. Because he's not able to appoint. But if we're able to introduce a concept that the Torah points to shliach, even a minor is able to have an agent. So if that's the case, what the Ramban wants to derive from the Gemara here, that Zchiyah, the mechanics of Zchiyah is not agency, there's no basis for it. But if you learn, as we mentioned Tosas, that Tosas learns the concept, the principle of Zchiyah mitam shlichus means, because we say with certainty, if the person would know that he wants to do something beneficial to him, he definitely would appoint him to be a shliach. So appointing and Zchiyah is one and the same. The way the agent, within the context of Zchiyah comes the agent, is identically as you appoint an agent. So if that's the case, a minor has no relevance to Zchiyah either, according to Tosas. So if that's the case, when the Gemara says it's not shlichus, it's Zchiyah, if you learn like Tosas, seemingly it would be a proof that the mechanics of Zchiyah is not shlichus, correct? Because it's really one and the same, according to Tosas. And that's what the Ramban is learning. Because if the Ramban would learn Zchiyah mitam shlichus as Rashi, then he wouldn't even have a basis for what he's saying over here. Zchiyah, the Torah intervenes and appoints the shliach. Wait, so seemingly it would be a proof. No, so it would be a proof. As the Ramban will discuss the Ran, and the Ran says it's not a proof. The Ran says no, it's not. That's the mechanics of schia is not shlichus. That's what Ramban wants to derive from. Okay, we'll discuss this in a moment. Okay, the Ran says it's not a proof. We'll discuss the Ran in a moment. Okay, but according to Rashi, doesn't even begin. According to Tosas, seemingly it is. This is the basis to say that the mechanics of schia is not shlichus, right? Otherwise, how does the schia have relevance to a minor, right? If evidently clearly it's not. Okay. So let's get back to your question.
How does Tosfos understand the mechanics? What are the mechanics?
There's a Gezeres HaKosov that when a person wants to do something which is beneficial for a third party. I'll give you an example. The Gemara says that, let's talk about Chav L'Cherim. Chav L'Cherim, where it's a detriment to another party. What about if a person is one's slave? Slave. So we had a question that if you pick up a lost article, ownerless, on behalf of a third party, the Gemara has a question, is that considered Chav L'Cherim or not Chav L'Cherim? Is that a detriment to a third party or not? Right? That was the question. Why? Because although the world has no claim to it, but since it's an opportunity, denying that an opportunity, denying one an opportunity, is that the equivalent of the case where a person seizes from a debtor, where it's actually a detriment to other creditors? Is that the same or not? So the Gemara cites a brisa. It says that if a person's slave, Eved Kanani, goes and picks up a lost article, the lost article is what? The acquisition of the slave is on behalf of the master. So the Gemara says, you see clearly that what? Even where you see that in Aveda is not a Chav L'Cherim. That you see the slave is able to acquire the lost article, the owner's article, on behalf of the master. This Gemara above Mitzvah. Wait. So the Gemara says no. Yad Eved Ki Yad Rabbo. That the hand of the slave is the equivalent of the hand of the master. That's what Gemara says. It's no proof. So the question is, it's not a shliach. I understand that. That's the question. So the Torah says that when you want to do an action on behalf of someone else, the Torah says your hand is the hand of the other person. It's not an agency. It's not a concept of agency. It's like you call it a chotzer. Call it a chotzer, like it's your domain. When I want to do something on behalf of someone else, I become your domain. So see, for marriage, it's not a question of domain. There you have to be the person. To divorce a person, you have to be the husband. That it's the act of slaughtering the Korban Pesach that should be considered you slaughtered it. It's not enough that it's your hand. You have to be the person. But within the realm of acquisition, being the domain is sufficient. So over here we're talking about acquisition, dividing up the land. So what the Nasi does, it's the equivalent, is the hand of the what? Of the one who's acquiring. Right? It's equivalent. Yeah, so let's talk now. No, so I want to just bring out something. I mentioned no. Chav L'Cherim is a separate discussion. Why? It's not a Chav L'Cherim. It's not a Chav L'Cherim. We'll discuss this in a moment. But yesterday I mentioned there's a machlokes. The Gemara says in Sukkah that on the first day of Sukkot you should not give the Daled Minim to a minor. Why? Because once he acquires it, we weren't Yotze yet with the Daled Minim. The first day of Sukkot, you have to own the Daled Minim. Ukachtem Lochem. You have to have full monetary ownership in the Daled Minim, 4 species. So if you give it to the child, then the child acquires it, he's not able to transfer it back to you. So therefore, you should first be Yotze. That's the question, how did he acquire it? So that's the machlokes we mentioned in Rashi and Tosas. Tosas says there's a concept known as Das Acheres Makne. A child has the means to acquire, meaning he has the ability to acquire, but what's lacking? In intent. Because the intent of a child, halachically, has no value. But his action is an action. Let's say the act of acquisition is taking possession. Physically, he can take possession. If a person takes possession of something where he's not aware, it's in his sleep, does it have any value? It has no value because there's no intent. The intent of the child has no value. So even when he takes possession, it has no value. So Tosas introduces a concept. We have the principle known as Das Acheres Makne. That the intent of the one who wants to transfer it into his domain, his intent of the transfer compensates for the intent that's lacking for the acquirer. Right? Wait, so the child takes the lulav, and the one who owns the lulav has in mind to transfer the ownership to the child. So why can't the child acquire? Because it's lack of intent. So the intent of the transferor, his intent compensates for what's lacking in terms of the child who takes it. So therefore, the child, according to Tosas, it's a bona fide acquisition on a Torah level. The child owns this daled medium, but again, how does he transfer it back? He's not able to. Therefore, the Gemara says, on the first day of Sukkot, you should not give the daled medium to the child, because if you do, you're not going to be yotze with it afterwards. Okay? So what comes out the difference? What about if a child wants to acquire an ownerless object? He's not able to, because there's no transfer, right? If you pick up an ownerless object in the street, a child, he has the form, but he doesn't have the intent. He can do the action, but who's going to compensate for the intent there? Therefore, he's not able to. So the Gemara says, Darki Shalom, that for the sake of peace, because if somebody would take it away from him, the father of the child would be upset, and it would create all kinds of quarrels and disputes. Therefore, rabbinically, we say, when the child picks up something to acquire, rabbinically, it's considered the equivalent of his. But on Torah level, it's nothing. It's nothing on a Torah level.
How does the Masei?
Wait, so that's what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. Some say, if you hold the concept, the principle of dasacheres makneh, which Rashi rejects, Rashi says that Gemara over there speaking, it's purely rabbinical. Rabbinically, the Chachamim say that a child is able to acquire. It has nothing to do with dasacheres makneh. We're not talking about a 3-year-old child. A child who has intelligence. What's lacking? Halachic intelligence. When a child is 9, 10 years old, it's called, the Gemara says in Gittin, it's called Peutos. Peutos, when a child reaches a certain age where he understands what he's doing, and he has a minimal level of responsibility, that child, rabbinically, his acquisition is an acquisition. So we're speaking about giving a lulav to that kind of child. You should not give it to that kind of child because he acquires rabbinically, but he cannot transfer. A child of that age, although rabbinically he's able to acquire, he's not able to transfer to another domain. So if you the basis for the acquisition is rabbinical. The rabbi said it works in one direction, not the other direction. No, there's no das, of course. There's no das, right? He has no halachic intelligence. Some say, if you say that, if you learn like Rashi, see, if you learn like Tosas, there's a concept of dasacheres makneh. So then I understand you could introduce the principle of zechiyah. The hand of the acquirer is the hand of the one who's acquiring, right? So you could say there's right. I understand. But let's say the one who's zocher, the one who he becomes his yad, but seemingly you have to have das. Let's say the acquirer, the one who wants to take possession of something on behalf of a third party, he's not aware he's taking possession. There's no das. Oh, we can say zechiyah. You can't say zechiyah. So if you say the intent of the acquirer could be attributed to the acquirer, right? So fine. My intent as an adult could compensate to the intent that's lacking by a child. Correct? Okay, fine. But over here, right? In the case of the nasi, why is the action, the dividing of the nasi, why does it have any value? Because his intent has value. But we say, but what are you? You're the hand of the child. But your das, your intent, how does it compensate for what he's lacking? If you say the intent of the adult is able to could contribute to the minor, so that's the equivalent of dasacheres makneh. You understand what I'm saying? So therefore, there's a similarity. As when I give a child a gift, when he does the action, my intent can compensate for what's lacking. So when we speak about zechiyah, although I'm not his agent, my action, me being his hand, my intent could compensate for him. My intent is his intent. But if we say that intent, if intent is lacking in the individual himself, it cannot be compensated. So how do we create it? How do we bring it together? Right? So if you hold, you do find this concept of dasacheres makneh. So you say zechiyah is lav mitam shlichus. The intent of the acquirer, where it's in the benefit of the one you're acquiring for, his intent has value to acquire on behalf of the individual who's not aware of it. But if you say intent cannot be transferred, the acquirer has to have the intent, so it's not going to work. So it's very good. According to Rashi, Rashi understands when the Gemara says zechiyah midam shlichus, it is a shliach. How does it work? The Torah points the agent to be the agent. the child is not appointing, as Tosas learns. Right? If you learn like Tosas, then that it's the individual. If he would know, he definitely would appoint him. So then we have a problem in the Gemara here. A child cannot appoint. So then Schiyah cannot be Bitam Shlichus. He can't be an agent. Correct? But according to Rashi, the mechanics of Schiyah Bitam Shlichus doesn't mean if he would know, he would definitely appoint him. But what does it mean? If it's beneficial, the Torah appoints the individual to be the agent. So if that's the case, a minor could have an agent. We only find a minor cannot appoint an agent, but having an agent, he can have an agent. According to Rashi, when the minor says Schiyah, it does mean Shlichus. Originally, Gemara thought that each individual member of the tribe appointed the Nasi to be his agent. Gemara said that's not possible, because there are a number of minors. A minor cannot appoint. Gemara says no, the minor didn't appoint. The Nasi is acting on behalf of his tribe. And because it's something which is beneficial for the tribe, the Torah appoints. So if that's the case, the minor is not a problem any longer. But according to Tosas, that what is the chiyah? That the individual appoints, of course we'd say with certainty, even though it's unbeknown to the person, if he would have known, he would have. So if that's the case, how do we rectify the problem with the minor? It's still a problem. So then we have to say, according to Tosas, when the Gemara says Zechiyah means the mechanics is not shlichus. There's a concept no Zechiyah. But I'm saying, but if you say that, then you have to see this is consistent with Tosas. But a minor doesn't have das. He doesn't have intent. So you say the intent of one individual is able to contribute to that. The hand is the equivalent to the hand of the minor. It's like a schotzer. Where's the das? Not a problem. The intent of the acquirer, his intent, contributes to the what? The intent of the acquirer. Now, let's talk a minute. According to Tosas, he's going to seemingly would be a proof that the mechanics of Schiyah is not Shliach. So we just said it's the equivalent of the hand. It's his domain. But even for a domain to acquire, you need intent. So whose intent is it? It's intent of the one who wants to acquire on behalf of the third party. No, according to Rashi, it doesn't work. According to us, it does work. When you give the gift to the child, the intent of the gifter, that's a cheres makne. So that's good. It's very good. This is consistent with Tosfos. That the intent of the gifter, of the contributor, compensates for the acquirer, that although he doesn't have the intent. No, not shlichus. By lulav. What's the case of lulav? Lulav. When you give a gift to a child, does he have intent? No. All he can do is do the physical action. So where's the intent?
But the owner of the lulav is giving, is transferring over.
I know, but you have to have intent to acquire. So the acquirer has to have the intent. Okay. So Tosas introduces a concept. No, even if he doesn't have the intent, as long as he does the action, the intent of the gifter contributes, compensates for the acquirer. Midoraisa, on a Torah level. That's why the lulav is the child's on a Torah level. It's not on a rabbinical level. Rashi says, no, it's on a rabbinical level. That you can't, he doesn't hold it that. He rejects the concept. Right? There's no such thing as das cheres makne. So seemingly you have a problem. So how do we learn Zechiyah? If Yod Zechiyah is not, the mechanics is not shlichus, so how does it work? Right? The answer is very simple. Rashi learns Zechiyah, it could be shlichus. Because it's not the person is doing the appointing, the Torah does the appointing. But according to Tosas, that Tosas rejects Rashi, and he says even Zechiyah if it's shlichus. It's the person doing the appointing. So over here when the Gemara says the minor, the Nasi represented the minor. In what context? Zechiyah. How could it be Zechiyah? If it's shlichus, that means the minor again is doing the appointing. A minor cannot appoint. So evidently we have to say the mechanics of Zechiyah is not within the context of agency. It's a new concept. He's the domain. But as domain, you have to have intent. So it's not a problem according to Tosas, because the intent of one could compensate where the intent is lacking.
There's no transfer of ownership. The Nasi is just a custodian for the child until such time as the child becomes an agent.
But how does he? What is the meaning of a custodian? He has to acquire it.
So the Nasi,
No, when we speak about a custodian only means you have assets belonging to a minor. Call it a guardian. He's the guardian. I will manage the assets of the minor. This is not management of assets. This is acquiring on behalf of the minor. How do you become the representative of the minor to acquire on his behalf? That means you and him and the minor have to be one and the same. How do you become one and the same? And now we're not speaking hefker bez and hefker. There's not hefker bez and hefker here. That means somehow, because the Gemara is saying, because your action is beneficial to the child, you could act on his behalf. But you're asked, what's the mechanics of that? There's a concept known as chiyah. So we say, what's chiyah? Domain. But for domain, again, you have to have das. You have to have some degree of intent. Now let's get back to the let's get back.
could you say that maybe the Beth owns the property?
No, it's not the best. The property belongs to the Shevet. Belongs to all Jews. Eretz Yisrael belongs to all Jews. Now the tribes divide the land, and then the Nasi divides the portions of that parcel which the whole tribe receives.
Now you have a child who is a minor, and he cannot take possession. So why
So who takes possession on his behalf?
the Beth? Why can't you say that? It's like the state owning a piece of property.
No, that's a hefker bez and hefker concept. That's a hefker bez. This is not what was chi is not hefker bez and hefker.
No, we're contemplating two possibilities, Zechir and agency. I'm saying maybe there's a third possibility. And the third possibility is the state owns it.
Not
until
state.
the child,
What do you mean state owns it? There's no such thing as.
the tribe.
It's not the child. When the land was divided, from that moment on, the child owns it.
How do we know that?
Because that's reality. The land was divided. It's not. We had to wait till a later date for the child to to own it.
Because we're saying the child cannot own something.
There was 7 years of conquest, 7 years of dividing. No, so we have but they did.
You're dismissing the possibility.
No, because factually, when the land was divided, everybody was equal. I mean, when each one received his parcel, whether you were a minor or a major or an adult, the land became your land at that moment.
How do we know?
That's the simple understanding.
Maybe not. I mean, because we're saying
It's not a
we're saying
consideration.
If we're grappling with how does a child own something.
So if it would be a guardian, or it would be the court, what do we have to talk? What do we have to? Zochem al Mishalab Fanav. It has nothing with Zochem al Mishalab Fanav. The Gemara is introducing a concept. We're able to do something which is beneficial on behalf of another party, unbeknown to him. What does that normally mean throughout the Torah? What does that mean? My action is attributed to that individual. That's what the words mean. What you're introducing is a new concept. The Gemara is not saying this at this point. Why is the Nasi able to act on behalf of the minor? Zochen la'odem shelo b'fanav. He's able to, his action, because it's beneficial, he's able to act, his action is on behalf of the one who's unbeknown to that person. Right? If I go to the store and buy something, purchase something for an adult, we say Zochen la'odem shelo b'fanav. Does the adult who you take it on his behalf, does he become immediately the owner? The answer is yes. What's it based upon? The principle? Zochen la'odem shelo b'fanav. Whatever that means. Agency, domain, whatever it means. But it becomes the person who you took possession on his behalf. So now you can say no. But for a minor, it means something else. The Gemara is classifying this as Zochen la'odem shelo b'fanav. That is what's happening here. So what it means for an adult, it means the same thing for a minor.
When we say that Bethel has the power to decree something owners,
That's hefker bez and hefker.
who is the owner once that decree is made?
No owner. No owner. Whoever they determine should be the owner.
Okay. So can the Bethel say we own it?
They don't have to say that. Once they do that, they're able even to transfer it into the domain of the child. They can do whatever they want. That's the principle hefker bez and hefker. But the Gemara is not using that term. The term is zochen la'odem shelo b'fanav. As we say zochen la'odem shelo b'fanav for an adult, zochen la'odem shelo b'fanav for a child. What you're saying is no. For an adult, he becomes the immediate owner. For a child, then it's not zochen la'odem shelo b'fanav. You know, you're just protecting something which eventually you're going to give to him. It's not you're doing something which is beneficial to him, although it's unbeknown to him. It's irrelevant. I'm protecting his domain. If a piece of property is about to be plundered, and I protect it on behalf of the owner. Is that Zochalam Shel B'Fanov? I'm protecting what's his. It's not the principle Zochalam Shel B'Fanov. Okay, this is where I want to go. We mentioned, Tosa says, what is the principle of Schim Tam Shlichus? Because if the person would know, we could say with certainty, he would definitely appoint him to be the shliach. So it's equivalent of the one who's not aware, he appointed the person who's acting on his behalf to be his agent. That's Tosis. So the Tosa mentioned the Tosa Choshen has a question, but we rule Yush Lo Midas Lo Havi Yush. That although theoretically, if he would have known the state of affairs of his possession, he definitely would have despaired. He would say, Vailach Soren Kiss. That's an expression of despairing. But unless you despair, you haven't despaired. Even though definitely without any doubt he would have despaired. Unless the person experiences that sense of despair, the object is not ownerless. And that's the way we rule. It's not ownerless. The third party is not. Meaning, the Gemara discussed in Bava certain things. So something which doesn't have, no, the Gemara says, so Gemara asks a question on this. Person loses money. Money, person would despair immediately because there's no way to identify money. Okay? So the Gemara asks a question. The Gemara asks, we see clearly a man drops something, somebody picks it up immediately. He has no obligation to return it. How does he have a right to keep it? If Yush Lo Midas Lo Havi Yush, that's the question which Rava asks on Abaye, because Rava's position, it is considered. So Abaye answers because when a person, when it comes to money, on a certain subconscious level, the person's always feeling his pocket. So therefore, the moment he loses it, he immediately is aware at some level. So therefore, this despair is immediate. He has that sense of loss immediately. That's the reason why it becomes ownerless, or whatever Yush is. Okay? So that was the Tosa's question. So we see, and the Gemara shows that just as in regard to despair, there has to be a certain level of consciousness. You have to be conscious that something's taking place. So if somebody wants to act on your behalf, or even when it's beneficial to you, for him to be your agent, there has to be some degree of awareness that you want him to be your agent. If you're not aware of the situation, he doesn't become your agent.
Why does that have to be symmetrical?
I'm not going to learn above Masei now. Wait a second. The Gemara equates many cases to Yush Lo Midas, okay? So that's the Tosa's difficulty with Tosis. So what I answer, you have to answer it. I mean, Tosa says it. So what I said was this. The Gemara in Elam Metzius discusses a case. A person purchases a house, and he finds a treasure in the wall. So we say he's permitted to keep it. Purchase a house. It's been many generations Jews have owned this house. So we say that the original Amorites, they buried treasures in the walls, and therefore it goes back centuries. Therefore, the one who finds it in the wall, he's able to take it, because it's considered ownerless. That's a presumption we're making. So the Rosh asks the question of Mitzvah. We have a principle: if something falls into your courtyard, unbeknown to you, your courtyard acquires for you your domain. So the prior Jew who owned the house, his chotzer, his domain acquired for him. So if that's the case, you have an obligation to return it to the prior owner, or whoever was the original owner. Correct? If you're able to identify who the original owner was. So how does the person who locates it, finds it, have a right to take it? Right? The prior owner, his domain acquired it. That's the Rosh's question. Okay? So the Rosh says a principle. When we establish a principle, one's domain acquires for him, although he's not aware. Something falls into your domain acquires, as long as it's a protected domain. You need chotzer mishtameres. Okay? Now, what exactly is the mechanics of that? So he explains that something which conceivably is possible to happen, there is a mindset, whatever falls into my domain, that's what I want. So even though you're not aware of the moment something may enter into your domain, but there's a constant mindset, if it's something beneficial to me, if it should enter into my domain, that's something I want. So therefore, even though you're not aware when it actually enters into the domain, but since the mindset is, if anything should, and whenever it does, I want my domain to acquire, So that's a question. It's a conscious acquisition. However, the treasure, who ever heard of finding a treasure in a wall? That's something, it's not expected. So because it's so far-fetched and so remote, it's not within the purview of the person's mindset, therefore the domain doesn't acquire. Because so we see, according to the Rosh, there is a degree of das. Even when I'm dealing with chotzer, you need das. There is a certain degree of intent. The intent is, if anything should fall into I want it. I don't have to be aware exactly when it happens. But whenever it does, I want to have that.
Losing money, you're always aware that...
That has nothing to do with that. No. Person doesn't expect to lose.
So
Whenever I lose money, I'm going to despair. That person doesn't think that way.
so that's the end. That's why
But I'm talking about chotzer. We're differentiating between something that falls into your courtyard or the treasure that you find in your wall. So the previous owner, since it's so remote, he wouldn't expect it. So therefore, that's not part of his. Therefore, his domain never acquired it. But something which things are expected to happen, things do happen. Therefore, the mindset is, if that should happen, I want my domain to acquire. That's how the Rush differentiates between something which is remotely possible and something which could happen. Okay?
Rabbi, what about if the previous owner searched for a possible treasure and didn't find it?
You know what's that called? You know what that's called? That's looking for a nechtekatog. You know what a nechtekatog is? That's exactly what it is. You're looking for yesterday, which is not coming back. You search.
But the intent.
Nah, it doesn't mean anything. No. So if he didn't find it, so what was his conclusion?
He didn't find it.
No, if he had it in his will, his grandfather buried something in the wall. And you looked and you couldn't locate it. Somebody else located it. So they're clear, of course. The person who finds it can't take it. But you looked because you thought the Amorites had treasures. You weren't able to look. So that means your conclusion was it's not there. That's it.
So this buried treasure in the house is ownerless.
It's ownerless.
There's no acquisition.
No previous owner acquired it with his domain. So I wanted to say the concept of Zochon al Mishalo B'fanov, where Tosa says that if a person would know that somebody wants to do something which is beneficial to him, with certainty would appoint him to be his agent to act on his behalf. This is no different than Chatzer Tzadon Kol Shalom. People do things for other people unbeknown to them. As a result of that, what is the mindset of a person? If anybody should want to act on my behalf as my agent, I'm agreeable to it. That is the mindset of a person. So if that's the case, it has no relevance to Yishlom Midas. That's no different than the Chotzer.
You use it for a minor too.
Wait a second. No, because a minor cannot appoint.
If he would know that...
But he doesn't know. It's not possible for him to know. The minor's mindset has no halachic value. Here, the person's mindset has halachic value. So therefore, it's the equivalent. I did appoint him. I make a statement. Anybody who wants to be my agent should be my agent. He's my agent. But I'm not sure who he is. Doesn't make a difference. But I made a statement. I made a declaration.
So how did the Rosh deal with the problem? In the beginning, they didn't know that there was buried treasure in their walls. But sometime later, this was found out, and now we have a tradition that everybody knows that the Amorites buried treasure in their walls.
Not everyone. No, they don't. Not only in the walls. No, we don't know. We don't know.
No. I'm saying today.
They buried in the ground. They buried. Who knows where?
Buried it in their property. Okay. So now,
Maybe yes, maybe no.
the day that Joshua divided the land and gave everybody the peace, they didn't know that they would find buried treasure. The passage of time, and somebody finds it in the walls, another person finds it in the walls, etc. So now, 100 years later, whatever it is, some period later, they find out. Now, if I owned a piece of property and I heard that that happened, I would say to myself, if I'm so fortunate to find it in my walls, it's mine. Now it's no longer remote. So with the passage of time, everybody who owned the property would say, I want it.
Okay. You know, it's interesting. The Meraglim, getting into Chumash a little bit, the Meraglim, they come to Moshe, we want to send spies. What do you want to send spies? Agents, to scout out the land. So they said to Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu should have rejected them immediately. If Hashem says, it's Eretz Zavos Chol V'Dvash, so what's the question? The conquest is going to be a miraculous conquest. So what do you have to send scouts? So the Medrash says, you know what they said? They said to Moshe, Moshe, you understand, God promised us that when we're going to come, we're going to find houses that are filled with goodness. He says, don't you think the Amoraim, the Amorites, you don't think they buried their treasures? So if we're going to come, we're not going to find their treasures. The houses are going to be empty. It's going to be a Chil Hashem. So if that's the case, we want to send spies to locate exactly where they hid the treasures. So we come, this will avoid a Chil Hashem. This will prevent the Chil Hashem. Moshe is Chil Hashem? Definitely. Let me consult. You could go. That was Moshe's blind spot. Chil Hashem. So the spies go. What did they come back? Fruit. So what was the conclusion? Nothing's buried, nothing's hidden. That's what they came back with. So what was the mindset? Maybe, yeah, maybe. Probably not. These people are secure. They don't believe they're ever leaving. So everything's in the open. Okay? As a result of that, what is the mindset of the person? It's not buried. It's not buried in the house. So it's something which is not presumed it's ever going to happen. So remote. Therefore, we don't apply a principle that one's domain acquires something which is not within a person's purview. Okay?
Just a question for Rashi. I could appoint a shliach that would do something that would hurt me. That doesn't benefit me. But I can't have Zofen, can't do Zechia where it's not something completely beneficial from every angle. So how would you say that Zechia is a shliach if I could have a shliach that does something that's not necessarily positive?
If you say somebody to you, I want you to slap me in the face, and he slaps you, is he considered a damager?
No, if I tell someone to go buy something for me, to my detriment.
That's what you want. Why not?
But it doesn't work as Zechia.
Because wait a second. No, it's the same idea. A woman could appoint an agent to receive a get, correct?
Yes.
But a third party who wants to accept the get on her behalf without her instruction, can he? Answer is no. But if you could appoint, why can't he accept? Because we could say with certainty, unless the person says, I'm interested, they're not interested. Who wants to bring a detriment on themselves? The only reason why an agent's name, because we could say with certainty, he would appoint him. So if it's beneficial, of course we could say that with certainty. But if it's to the detriment of the person, could you say with certainty he wants him to be the shliach? Definitely not. Unless he tells us so. So if you point the person's the shliach, is the agent.
On the men's side, there could be some third party, right, which decides on his own that this guy wants to divorce his wife, and he takes the get, which was good with his wife.
No. Because until it's over, it's not over. The essence of a divorce is a detriment. They're negative ramifications of a divorce. It's also a chovin.